Steel, in its essence, carries the memory of fire. It pulsates with the heat that tamed it. But there are creations where steel is not merely forged, it is challenged. It is pushed to the limits of human belief. World War II was not just a battle of men, but of industries, and in the heart of Germany, a metallurgical empire was about to give birth to something that was not just a weapon, but an obscene declaration of industrial power. A forged madness. The year was 1941. The objective was simple and terrifying: to destroy the most resistant fortifications on the planet. For Hitler, nothing should be impenetrable. He didn't want a cannon. He wanted an earthquake. He wanted the Gustav. This is the story of an artillery monster, so heavy that it required double rails and anti-aircraft squadrons just to breathe. This is the story of how Schwerer Gustav was born, at the limit of what was possible. In 1934, the German High Command approached Krupp, the gigantic industrial complex that had been supplying weapons to Germany for over a century. The demand was for a cannon capable of firing 7-ton projectiles for kilometers, penetrating 7 meters of reinforced concrete. Krupp's chief engineer, Erich Müller, faced the numbers. The weapon would be the largest piece of artillery ever built. It couldn't be towed. It would have to be assembled on site. Its scale challenged mobility, logistics, and even sanity. The engineers calculated. To achieve the necessary range and penetration power, the caliber would have to be 800 millimeters. The barrel alone would be over 30 meters long. The final piece would weigh 1,350 tons. To put that in perspective, that's the weight of 5 modern steam locomotives. Krupp wasn't just manufacturing metal. It was manipulating the density, resilience, and toughness of steel. The steel had to be perfect, free from the slightest imperfection that could lead to catastrophic failure under the explosive pressure of the shot. The main barrel of the Schwerer Gustav was the greatest forging challenge in history, requiring special furnaces and slow, precise tempering processes. Every inch of that steel was a battle against the laws of metallurgy. The factory that brought the Schwerer Gustav to life was a living organism, dedicated to scale. Each part of the cannon had to be manufactured in sections, as assembly would only occur on the battlefield, but this demanded unbelievable precision in each individual piece. The breech ring, the piece that would withstand the full force of the detonation, was a masterpiece of engineering. The 7.1-ton projectile, the He projectile, or 4.8-ton projectile, the armor-piercing projectile, Dora, was, in itself, a mini-bomb. The armor-piercing projectile, nicknamed Dora, in honor of the chief engineer's wife, was almost 5 meters tall. When fired, it reached a speed of 820 meters per second, traveling 48 kilometers. The energy released at the moment of firing was enough to power a small city. To control such power, everything had to be oversized: the hydraulic pistons, the breech threads, the elevation mechanisms. There was no room for error. Hundreds of workers worked in shifts, from machining the internal grooves of the pipe to installing the mounting rails. The first real test wasn't in battle, but in transport. The Schwerer Gustav was a railway gun, but it was so massive that it required an entire train composition just for itself. The cannon was transported disassembled, in more than 25 wagons. The logistics were surreal. Just to move the barrel, 3 locomotives in tandem were needed. In 1942, the Schwerer Gustav was ready. Its baptism of fire would be at the siege of Sevastopol, in Crimea. The Red Army had transformed the city into a fortress with underground concrete and stone casemates. Before firing, the cannon needed to be assembled. The assembly was a symphony of engineering and human effort. 400 minutes of assembly per day, for 3 weeks. A special double-track railway needed to be built on site. A team of 2,500 men was needed, for assembly, security, logistics, and artillery. For each shot, the engineers had to calculate not only the distance and elevation, but the Earth's rotation and the barrel temperature. Finally, the day of the first shot arrived, June 5, 1942. The noise wasn't a bang, it was a punch. A shockwave that could be felt for miles. The projectile, traveling at the speed of sound, was invisible, but its impact was undeniable. Schwerer Gustav fired 48 projectiles at Sevastopol, each with a specific target. One of the projectiles penetrated 30 meters into the ground and exploded a submerged ammunition depot beneath a bay. The cannon fulfilled its promise. Fortifications were pulverized. But the cost was immense. The barrel, even being a marvel of Krupp steel, degraded rapidly. The heat and friction of each shot were unbearable. After 48 rounds, the original barrel was worn out and needed to be replaced with a spare. The Schwerer Gustav was not merely a weapon of destruction, it was a weapon of psychological warfare. Its mere presence on the battlefield was meant to undermine enemy morale, proving that German industrial power was limitless. But the truth of engineering is that every machine has a price, beyond the financial one. The cannon would never again be used with the same effectiveness. Its movements were slow, predictable. It was a gigantic target, a logistical drain. The second cannon, the Dora, would only briefly participate in the siege of Stalingrad, but without glory. The era of heavy and massive artillery was ending, supplanted by air power and guided bombs. The Schwerer Gustav was the last and greatest work of a bygone era. With the Allied advance in 1945, the fate of Schwerer Gustav was sealed. It was too big to hide, too slow to escape. To prevent the engineering marvel from falling into enemy hands, the Wehrmacht decided to destroy it. The engineers who had spent years forging and assembling the giant were forced to turn it into smoldering scrap metal. The pipe was cut. The carriages, blown up. When American troops found the wreckage near Grafenwehr, Bavaria, what remained of Schwerer Gustav was merely proof of the insanity of total war. The steel, which began in the fire of the forge, returned to the dust of history. Schwerer Gustav did not win the war. But it will forever remain the epitome of destructive power that transcended logic, a monument forged in steel to megalomaniacal ambition. Somewhere, beneath the earth, fragments of that steel still hold the memory of the greatest pressure humanity has ever placed on a metal. The pressure of a 7-ton projectile. The pressure of total war.